The streets of Athens glowed in the firelight. Men crowded the agora, debating politics and philosophy late into the night. This was the birthplace of democracy, the city where Socrates walked, where Plato taught, where Aristotle reasoned about the universe itself. And yet, there was one thing Athens feared more than war, more than plague, more than the gods' anger: a woman with ideas. The law was clear. Women were to remain in the home. They could not vote. They could not speak in the assembly. They could not take part in public debate. But some did. And the city made sure history forgot them. One of the most dangerous names whispered in Athens was Aspasia of Miletus. She was no ordinary woman. Born in a city far from Athens, she arrived as a foreigner, and somehow became the companion of Pericles, the most powerful man in Athens. But it was not her beauty that made her dangerous. It was her mind. Aspasia was said to hold salons, gatherings where the greatest thinkers of Athens came to speak freely. Philosophers, playwrights, generals, all sitting in her house, debating love, war, and politics. Some claimed even Socrates came to her door to hear her speak. Imagine it, a woman teaching the man who would one day shape all of Western philosophy. But the city did not see her as a teacher. They saw her as a threat. Comic poets mocked her as a witch, a seductress who used her words to control Pericles. Pamphlets accused her of corrupting the youth. She was even put on trial, charged with impiety, a crime that could mean death. Pericles himself had to beg the jury to spare her life. She survived. But the message was clear. Athens did not tolerate a woman who thought too much. And Aspasia was not the only one. There was Diotima, the mysterious philosopher priestess. Plato tells us she taught Socrates the deepest secrets of love, the idea that love was a ladder leading to divine truth. But no other record of Diotima survives. No one knows if she was real or if Plato invented her, perhaps to hide the fact that his greatest teacher was a woman. Then there was Hipparchia, who lived a century later. She abandoned her wealthy family, refused marriage, and became a cynic philosopher, dressing as a man and debating in public squares. She humiliated men who tried to shame her, defeating them with clever arguments. But her story, too, is buried, known only in fragments, dismissed as eccentricity rather than genius. Why did Athens fear women like these? Because a woman who could speak and teach was dangerous to the order of the city. Athenian democracy depended on a simple idea, that men ruled and women obeyed. If women began to think for themselves, if they spoke of justice and freedom, they might demand those very things for themselves. And so, the safest way to protect Athens was to erase these women, to reduce them to footnotes, to whisper about them as lovers or witches rather than thinkers. Yet their influence was real. When you read Plato's dialogues on love, you are hearing Diotima's voice. When you admire the strategy of Athens during the Golden Age, you are seeing Aspasia's mind at work behind Pericles' policies. Even as the city tried to silence them, their ideas slipped through the cracks and changed history. But the cost was high. Most women's names are gone, their ideas lost forever. We can only imagine how many philosophers, poets, scientists never had the chance to speak because they were born female in the wrong century. And perhaps that was Athens' greatest fear of all, not the women they silenced, but the women whose voices never even began. What if somewhere, hidden in the ruins of Greece, lies a scroll written by one of these women, a treatise that could change our understanding of philosophy forever? What would it reveal about the ideas that shaped the Western world? And why were those ideas buried so deep? The agora was loud with men's voices, but somewhere, behind closed doors, the conversations were different. Late at night, when Athens slept, a circle of women gathered by lamplight. Not to weave, not to gossip, but to learn. The city feared them, but these secret gatherings kept the spark of thought alive. They debated ethics, love, and the nature of the soul. Some were wives of philosophers. Some were slaves. Some were priestesses, guardians of sacred rites. And yet they all shared something Athens could not allow: curiosity. Aspasia was their star. Plutarch writes that she taught rhetoric, the art of persuasion, to Pericles himself. Imagine the power of that. Pericles' speeches moved Athens to war. They honored the dead. They convinced citizens to risk everything for democracy. And the words that inspired them may have come from a woman's society called a foreigner. But knowledge had a price. Every time a woman spoke out, she risked public shame, or worse. If a man said something controversial, he was debated. If a woman did, she was accused of witchcraft or corruption. The city wanted women to remain silent, but some refused. There were whispers of women philosophers who walked barefoot like the cynics, mocking the rules of society. One story tells of Hipparchia, who stunned an arrogant man at a banquet. When he tried to humiliate her by asking why she abandoned her loom for philosophy, she replied, "Do you think I have made a poor choice if I spend my time learning instead of weaving?" Her words silenced the room. But history still tried to silence her. Her writings are gone, her teachings remembered only in fragments. Religion offered another path for women to think, but it was a dangerous one. The Pythia, priestess of Apollo at Delphi, held the power to guide kings, generals, and city-states. Her words could start wars or stop them. But even she was controlled by men, her words interpreted by priests. Some scholars believe her cryptic prophecies were a way for women to express truth in a world that did not want to hear it. And then there were the mystery cults. These secret religious societies allowed women to take part in rituals forbidden in public life. In the Eleusinian mysteries, women stood beside men, learning secrets about life, death, and rebirth. To speak about these mysteries was punishable by death. And perhaps this secrecy gave women a kind of freedom. Here, for a short time, they could be equal to men, even priests. But these glimpses of freedom frightened Athens. Philosophy, religion, politics, these were the tools of power. If women had them, what would stop them from reshaping the city? The solution was brutal but effective: erase their names, burn their writings, and let men take credit for their ideas. Modern scholars now suspect that some of Plato's most revolutionary ideas, like the equality of souls or the concept of love leading to the divine, may have come from women he knew. But we cannot prove it, because their voices were erased. Still, there are clues. In the Symposium, Socrates speaks of Diotima, who taught him that love is not just desire, but a path to truth. Why name her at all if she were fiction? Why give her the most profound speech in the dialogue? Perhaps Plato could not ignore her brilliance, even if the city wished he would. And so Athens remained divided. By day, it celebrated reason and freedom. By night, it silenced half its population. This tension would eventually break the city, but not before shaping the world's first ideas of justice, virtue, and philosophy. The question is, what might have been if women had been allowed to speak freely? Would philosophy have looked different? Would democracy have been stronger? Or would Athens have fallen even faster, brought down by ideas too radical for its time? The answer lies buried in time, hidden in forgotten graves and burned scrolls. But one thing is certain: the fear of women thinkers was not just Athens' fear. Rome inherited it. Medieval Europe strengthened it. And echoes of it still remain today. When Athens silenced its women, it believed it had secured its future. But ideas are hard to kill. They slip through cracks, carried in whispers, hidden in stories, disguised as myths. And sometimes, they resurface centuries later, stronger than ever. Take Diotima's teaching of love. Plato preserved it, perhaps without fully realizing its power. Through his dialogues, her vision of love as a ladder to truth would inspire Christian mystics, Renaissance humanists, and even modern psychology. The very idea Athens wanted to hide, that women could teach men the highest truths, survived. But there's another layer to this story, darker and far more intriguing. Some historians now argue that the persecution of women thinkers was a deliberate act, a political strategy. Athens was fragile. Its democracy depended on a delicate balance: citizens voting, soldiers fighting, slaves working, women raising future citizens. If women began to question that balance, to demand education, equality, or even political power, the whole system might collapse. So Athens built invisible chains: no votes, no property rights, no voice. And yet, fragments of resistance survive. Archaeologists have found pottery shards with women's names scratched on them, marks of ostracism, where citizens voted to banish dangerous individuals. Imagine that. Women, not just men, seen as dangerous enough to exile. Women whose thoughts or actions threaten the order of the city. Their names remain, though their words are gone. Other clues come from tragedy. Greek plays like Medea or Antigone were written by men, but they gave women voices that Athens rarely heard. Antigone defies the king, saying there is a law higher than any ruler's. Medea dares to speak her pain, to curse the men who betrayed her. Were these plays a warning? Or were they a secret way of letting women speak, on stage if not in the streets? Then came the philosophers of later centuries. Some Roman thinkers, inspired by Greek ideas, dared to teach women. The Stoics argued that reason was universal, that women had the same capacity for virtue as men. But as Rome grew more powerful, its control over women grew tighter. The pattern repeated: silence, erase, control. And yet, some women refused to vanish. In Alexandria, centuries later, there was Hypatia, a mathematician, philosopher, and astronomer. She taught men, advised governors, and defended Greek thought long after Athens had fallen. Her death was brutal, torn apart by a mob, but her legend lived. Hypatia became the symbol of what Athens had tried to suppress, a woman who thought freely and without fear. This is the great irony of history. The more Athens tried to silence women, the more powerful their memory became. Today, scholars search for the missing voices. Each fragment of writing, each faint reference, is like a ghost speaking across millennia. Together, they form a picture Athens never wanted us to see, a world where women were philosophers, teachers, and leaders. And it leaves us with a haunting question. If women had been free to think and speak alongside men from the very beginning, would philosophy, science, and democracy have evolved faster? Would wars have been fewer? Would humanity have been wiser? Or would we have feared the power of ideas even more? The silenced voices of Athens are still speaking. Not from the agora, not from the lecture halls, but from the ruins, the fragments, the stories we keep finding. And they remind us that knowledge is dangerous, but silence is even more so.